Hi class, welcome to Module 3. This is your introduction presentation for Module 3 where we'll be looking at administrative materials. An overview of this presentation, there's just a few announcements, one efficient research tip, and then a general overview of Module 3. So a few announcements. I'll be grading your Module 2 assignments. I am traveling these first few days of this first week. I'm hoping that won't impact me getting your Module 2 assignments back to you, but I will keep you updated on that time frame. And I want to look ahead to the final assignment. As a reminder, the final assignment covers everything we cover in the course. So all modules, modules 1, 2, 3, and 4, all the content, all that information will be covered in the final assignment. I just want to keep that in your mind as you're going through content. Remember that everything is fair game for the final assignment. One efficient research tip for this presentation is awareness of process. You've probably realized I'm asking you to describe your research process in your assignments. And I'm not only doing that so I can see how you're finding information, I'm also doing that for you because as you write out your research process, as you write out how you found information, issues you may have had, how you fixed those issues, that helps you see your research process and really recognize where inefficiencies may be entering, maybe areas where, hey, this was really efficient, I should do that again. So just writing out your research process and thinking about it deeply, not just doing it, but thinking about it can help you find inefficiencies, identify areas where you could get faster, or even identify where you're doing well. Now on to Module 3 overview. Important dates. Module 3 becomes accessible on February 5th. February 11th, your first discussion board post is due. This is an original post. There are two options, like last time. You only have to select one of those options. And then February 18th, your response post for the discussion board is due, and your Module 3 assignment is due. In Module 3, we're going to be looking at administrative law. So I want to go over a little bit of terminology and just do a brief overview of things that you learned in Introduction to Legal Research, but you might need a refresher on. I'm very cognizant that you take Introduction to Legal Research in your first semester of your first year of law school. So you might not remember everything. And regulations in administrative law are pretty heavy lifts. So I just want to give you an overview so that as you move through the rest of the content, you'll have this good base knowledge. First, some terminology. When we say administrative law, what we mean is law made by administrative agencies. And an administrative agency is an entity that develops, it enforces, and oversees regulations. And when we say regulations, what we mean are the rules that are generated by administrative agencies to implement statutes. They aren't statutes, but they're implementing statutes. At the federal level, federal regulations are codified in the Code of Federal Regulations. You'll see this shortened as CFR. And at the state level in Maryland, a codification of Maryland regulations are in the Code of Maryland Regulations, which you'll hear called COMAR. What are regulations? Regulations are rules that are generated by administrative agencies to implement statutes. They elaborate on the scope of a statute. So what regulations do is they provide more complexity to a legislative scheme than the legislator wants to include in the statute. So more complexity generally means regulations are longer and more complicated. Regulations can also be passed and updated quicker than legislation. Think about last week, that long process of getting a bill through the legislature to become law. That long process doesn't occur at the regulatory level, so it can be quicker to update and change things at the regulatory level. That's another benefit of regulations. When we talk about administrative agencies, these are agencies that develop, enforce, and oversee regulations. At the federal level, we have executive agencies and independent agencies. Executive agencies help the president carry out the president's constitutional and statutory responsibilities. These agencies operate underneath the executive branch and are within one of the cabinet departments. So examples are the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Justice. There are also independent agencies, and these are created by Congress and are meant to help administer various aspects of the government's powers. Examples of independent agencies are the Environmental Protection Agency and the Central Intelligence Agency. Similar, at the state level, we have Maryland administrative agencies, and these are agencies that are authorized to promulgate regulations to implement Maryland statutes. At the state level in Maryland, we also have executive agencies and independent agencies. Executive agencies help the governor carry out their responsibilities. They also operate underneath the executive branch, and examples would be the Maryland Department of Agriculture and the Maryland Department of Health. Maryland independent agencies are created by the Maryland General Assembly, our legislature, and similar to the federal level, examples would be Maryland Environmental Services. Administrative agencies have various powers, and these are quasi-legislative, quasi-executive, and quasi-judicial. The one you're most familiar with likely is the quasi-legislative, the rulemaking. In Introduction to Legal Research, this is the one we focus on the most, the authority to promulgate regulations to implement statutes. We're also going to be looking at quasi-executive and quasi-judicial in this module. And the quasi-executive power is the authority to investigate potential violations of regulations and prosecute violations. The quasi-judicial power is the authority to hold hearings, subpoena witnesses, impose penalties, or even order injunctive relief. So we're going to be looking at all of these powers in this module. That was a brief overview of regulations and administrative agencies. You'll learn more as you get into the content for this module. Now, I want to draw your attention to a potential change coming up, and this is looking ahead. With legal research, we not only have to look at what is the law now. Last week, we looked at legislative history, so we looked at how the law was made. We looked backwards. We also have to look ahead at potential changes, potential developments, and there is a significant potential development on the horizon that would potentially significantly impact administrative law and therefore how we do research into administrative law. The U.S. Supreme Court has two cases in front of it. They heard oral arguments a few weeks ago in these cases. They have not made a decision yet, but it is likely that the court is going to overrule or very much limit the Chevron deference. If you are not familiar with Chevron deference, there's a link on this slide that gives you a good overview of what it is. In the content, you have a few resources that give you some background as to what it could mean for administrative agencies, and in particular, in terms of healthcare and health law. This is a potentially significant change in development. So it's something that we need to be looking ahead to. And this is just a reminder that when you're doing legal research, you need to look at what the law is now. You might have to look at how the law developed, but you'll also have to look forward to see what's on the horizon. In these two cases currently at the court that might overrule or limit Chevron are definitely something we need to look ahead to. That is it for Module 3's opening presentation. If you have any questions, if you notice any issues with any of the content or any of the questions on the assignment, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always here to help, and I hope you have a great module.